They came from nowhere. A rift in the sky above the Indian Ocean, a shimmering distortion that spat out ships like a whale spouting minnows. We were used to seeing stuff in the skies by then. Sure, the whole UFO craze didn't peter out like everyone thought it would. Turned out there were visitors, plenty of them, buzzing around in their little gravity-defying disks. Most were peaceful, curious even. Some looked downright ridiculous, and we'd have a good chuckle seeing them wobble about on Earth. Didn't mean we dropped our guard, though. Decades back, when the first disk hovered over that Texan farm, we sent up our top guns, just in case. Turned out Farmer Joe was right, the aliens had ray guns and weren't afraid to use them. The dogfight was over before it began. We lost a lot of good pilots that day. Learned a tough lesson: the skies weren't ours anymore. After that, there was this uneasy truce. Aliens did their thing, we did ours. Every now and then some government bigwig would try to make contact, send a fancy satellite with a gold record, or some crap like that. Never heard back. Figured the aliens were either ignoring us on purpose or were so different from humanity. Our messages sounded like a dolphin trying to recite Shakespeare. Whatever they were up to, we left them alone. Figured, as long as they weren't planting flags on the White House lawn, we'd get by. That was the first mistake. Big one. The kind that gets whole planets wiped out. See, we thought they came for exploration, maybe some light trade. We even dreamed of joining some galactic club, being pals with bug-eyed dudes and ladies with blue skin. Turns out, we were about as interesting to them as an anthill is to a farmer. I was in the Air Force, not the flyboy kind, more the computer nerd kind. My job was keeping an eye on radar arrays, feeding data to the higher-ups so they could feel important. Dull as dishwater most of the time, but hey, it paid the bills. It was my shift when the Indian Ocean thing happened. At first, we thought it was some hypersonic weapon test, maybe the Chinese getting cocky. Then the scale hit us. This wasn't a handful of missiles, it was a whole damn fleet. Hundreds, no, thousands of blips moving in formation, breaking out of that rift and spreading across the globe like spilled ink. The chatter on the comms went from confusion to full-blown panic in minutes. I saw the faces of those hardened generals, the ones who survived simulations and war games, turn ashen. This wasn't an exercise, it was the real deal. An invasion. The nerds like me, we were the first to know the full extent of it. Our fancy satellite arrays and data links gave us a bird's-eye view of the whole mess. And it was a mess, all right. Those weren't just scout ships or freighters. These were battleships, behemoths bristling with weaponry that spat out not bullets or missiles, but beams of light that tore through our planes like tissue paper. The dogfights we saw, they weren't even fair. Our top-of-the-line fighters, built to outmaneuver anything the earthly skies could throw at them, turned into flaming debris against those alien ships. And all the while, those bastards in their command centers just watched, coldly analyzing our feeble attempts to fight back. Down on the ground, it was just as bad. Land forces scrambled, tanks rolled out, missiles pointed at the sky in defiance. But the aliens, they weren't landing troops, at least not in the way we imagined. They stayed in orbit, their ships hanging like fat, angry wasps, raining destruction down at will. Not bombs, mind you. Something worse, beams that didn't leave craters, but turned buildings, people into fine ash that swirled away in the wind. Whole cities vanished in hours. The news feeds, when they were still running, felt like something out of an apocalypse movie. It wasn't the panicked reports or the shaky videos that got to me, though. It was the silence in between. The dead air where a bustling metropolis used to be. The sheer, unimaginable scale of it all. We tried to rally. We always did. Humans were stubborn like that. Even with the odds stacked against us, the end staring us in the face, something deep inside us refused to go down without a fight. Problem was, we'd spent decades building weapons to fight enemies who looked a lot like us: tanks, jets, bombs filled with good old-fashioned explosives. Turns out, that's about as useful against energy shields and orbital death rays as throwing rocks at a tank. The president went on TV, one of the few stations still broadcasting. He looked older than his years, the weight of an ending world crushing down on his shoulders. But there was a glint in his eye, a flicker of that last-ditch defiance. He talked about unity, about standing together in our darkest hour. His words were meant to inspire, but the hollowness rang through, even from my bunker miles underground. Resistance formed, of course. Soldiers too stubborn to die and civilians too desperate to just roll over. I hooked up with one such group, led by a grizzled old sergeant, with a voice like sandpaper and a collection of medals that must have weighed more than his rifle. We holed up in the ruins of an old military base, scrounging for supplies and intel, trying to play guerrilla war with an enemy that could pinpoint us from space. The thing about fighting a losing war, especially one as lopsided as this, is it eats away at you. Not just the fear, though that's always there, a constant hum in the back of your mind. It's the helplessness, the crushing knowledge that everything you do is just delaying the inevitable. Every success you have, every alien ship you manage to down. With salvage tech and blind luck, it just means they come back harder, crueler. We got good at hiding, became shadows in the rubble of our own cities. Learned the patterns of their patrols, the weak spots in their communication networks. We struck fast and disappeared, leaving behind burning wrecks and piles of alien bodies. Strange bodies, with too many limbs or eyes that glowed an eerie green. The victories were ugly, the kind that made you sick as much as they made you cheer. And for every win, there were a dozen losses. Comrades vaporized, their last screams cut short over the comms. Civilians caught in the crossfire, their shelters no match for alien firepower. The guilt piled on, a burden heavier than any rucksack. You started questioning, wondering, was it better to keep fighting, dragging this out even a little longer, or to surrender, to spare what was left of humanity? The sergeant, he didn't have those doubts. He'd lost family, seen his hometown reduced to a smoking crater, and that fire in his belly only burned hotter. We were on a raid, hitting a supply convoy nestled in the skeletal remains of a forest, when he got hit. Not some fancy alien weapon, mind you. A stray bullet from a jumpy survivor who thought we were the enemy. Dumb luck, the cruelest kind. We dragged him back to base, patched him up as best we could, but it was no use. The old soldier, a man who'd stared down death 100 times, was going out whimpering, thanks to a panicked kid with a rifle. He died holding my hand, his last raspy words not some grand speech, but a question. Was it worth it? Honestly, I didn't know. Still don't. After that, something in the resistance broke. Not all of it, but enough. People started deserting, slipping away into the ruins hoping the aliens would overlook them. Others, the ones with a taste for the brutal, turned on each other, vying to become the top dogs in the ashes. Our little band fractured, dissolving into the chaos. I wandered for a while. I'd seen enough death to last 10 lifetimes, and yet I couldn't bring myself to just lie down and accept it. There's this twisted survival instinct in us humans, I think. The will to endure even when enduring is the worst kind of torment. Stumbling through the wreckage of what used to be a shopping mall, its shattered atrium open to the gray sky, I found them. Not aliens. Survivors, dozens of them, huddled together in the hollowed-out stores. Their eyes filled with a feral mix of terror and desperation. Children with faces smudged with soot, old women clutching worn photos to their chests. Men staring off into the distance as if waiting for a rescue that was never coming. I watched them from the shadows, feeling a pang of something that might have been pity once. This was what humanity had become, a scared, whimpering animal, hiding from the predators. It was ugly, shameful, and yet it was all we had left. Something shifted in me then. The last flicker of soldierly pride died, consumed by a bleak understanding. It wasn't about bravery anymore, about racking up alien kills. That was a fool's game, played to distract from the inevitable. Now, it was about keeping these pathetic souls alive. One more day, one more hour, maybe long enough for some miracle, or at least until the end came swiftly. I stepped out of the shadows, ragged and filthy, but still holding my scavenged rifle. Their eyes fell on me, filled with suspicion, even fear. It took me a while to convince them I wasn't a raider, wasn't there to prey on their vulnerability. A shared trauma, that desperate need for any sliver of hope, created a fragile connection. Leadership, in the true sense of the word, isn't about barking orders or waving flags. It's about shouldering responsibility when everyone else wants to shirk it. I found myself doing just that, organizing these shell-shocked survivors, turning them all into a makeshift fortress. We rationed the meager supplies, patched up the broken walls, set watches on the perimeter. Every task, no matter how mundane, became an act of defiance. Children who hadn't smiled in days started playing again, their laughter echoing oddly in the ruined space. Old women who seemed ready to give up found purpose in teaching survival skills. Mending clothes, even telling the little ones stories of a world that no longer existed. It was a fragile thing, our little sanctuary, a candle flame flickering in a hurricane. And all the while, the knowledge hung over us, a suffocating weight. The aliens were still out there. They'd forgotten about us for now, a speck of dust in a vast, ravaged world. But sooner or later, their attention would return. The cleanup crew always comes back to sweep away the last of the grime. One evening, as the sickly sun dipped below the shattered horizon, I climbed to the roof of the mall. The air crackled with ozone from the fires still burning across the city, a permanent scar marring the sky. Movement caught my eye, a flicker of light miles away. Squinting, I made out shapes hovering above the ruins of what was once downtown. Alien drones, sleek and predatory, their green lights winking as they scanned the desolation. They were getting closer. Each circle they made brought them nearer to our haven. It was only a matter of time before they'd spot the signs of life, the campfire smoke, the faint pulse of our resistance. I turned away, my heart pounding a heavy rhythm against my ribs. Back inside, children were reciting multiplication tables. An old man was playing a chipped harmonica. A young couple stared into each other's eyes with the intensity of those who know time is short. This pathetic, broken, beautiful assembly, it was humanity now. Not the conquering species we thought we were. Not the starfaring explorers we dreamed of becoming. Just a collection of survivors, clinging to existence in the teeth of oblivion. I descended the ladder, the weight of the coming confrontation heavy on my shoulders. We'd prepare. We'd do all we could, and then we'd face whatever the aliens threw at us. Maybe we'd die. Most likely we would. But at least we wouldn't die on our knees. We'd die fighting, a flicker of defiance in the vast, uncaring darkness. And who knows, maybe, just maybe, that flicker might spark a fire somewhere out there. A fire that burned brighter than the one that had almost consumed us.